All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. And today we're get an opportunity. This is Dave Barton, and he is going to be sharing his testimony today. So, Dave, come on up and.
Okay. Hello, my name is Dave Barton, and for those of you I haven't met, I say thank you for giving me this opportunity to work with God and do my testimony here, right? So it's the first time I've ever done a public testimony. I've done a lot of public speaking in front of a lot of people. I've never been nervous, and right now I'm like, blah, 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 you know. This is God's work, so it's important. There's basically, with my testimonies, there's three phases to it. There's the pre, the event, and then the thereafter. What I start off with is to say to you is that I was not always a Christian. It wasn't that I was a bad guy or bad boy, but I embraced hedonism more than I embraced Christ. People used to ask me, they would say, "Do you believe in God?" And I would say, "Oh yeah, of course." And then I would immediately step out of the picture and go play with my toys. And at that time, got to keep in mind I'm from that state that nobody likes, all right, California. I had lots of toys. I had a Mercedes, I had a Jaguar, I had a fancy sailboat, I had two beautiful wives, divorces. I had the clothes that put John Travolta way down, obviously, you know. And I had it all. Rubbed elbows with the rich and famous. And I had the good life. But I was miserable. I wasn't happy. Of course, we all know the reason why, if you're suspecting, is that God wasn't in my life. And so I would pray, but I didn't really know how to pray. I would pray from here, not from here. And I would pray, and my prayers would look like, no disrespect, Lord. My prayers would look like, "Hey, God, I'm not really happy. You know, can you make me happy? Excuse me, I got to go play with my toys." That's not praying, but that's what I did. But God loved me. These are the things I've learned about that since. And God said, "Okay, I'm going to help you out here." So He took everything I had away from me. Everything. Everything I owned. I was destitute. I was so destitute that I got a little tent and I went out in the field. I'm originally from a place called Richmond, California. Across the bay is called Marin County, which is like the third top wealthiest county in the country. And I found a little old yard out there that nobody saw, and I pitched a tent. I was going to be homeless. And I was saved because a young couple picked me up and said, "No, you're not going to live out here. You're going to live with us." So there was a 3-year period where I was somewhat struggling to get by. And so finally I thought about, oh yeah, maybe if I can pray, I'll get this done. And I said, "God, I don't know what happened. What did I do wrong? I'm not a bad person. Why did this happen?" Well, little did I know is that I said, "Hey, God, I want you to make me happy." And so He took all that stuff that was not making me happy away. And so He gave me another chance. So for a lack of better words, I was able to obtain a certain amount of wealth again. And with that, I had marriage number 3. I was rubbing elbows with the rich and famous. I had this and I had that, and I wasn't happy. And with unhappiness, relationships go south. Divorce number 3. And still I wasn't a Christian, and just wasn't happy with everything. So some friends of mine said, "Hey, Dave, why don't you go hunting with us?" And I said, "You know I don't hunt. I haven't hunted, haven't had a rifle in my hand since I got out of the military some years ago." And they said, "Well, just come up, be our camp cook with us." And I said, "All right." So there's a little place, it's called Salmon, Idaho. I don't know if you heard of it. And above that, there's a place called 4th of July Creek. So these guys go hunting every year up there. So I went up there hunting, and I was the camp cook. And with that, while they were out hunting, I would drive around and I looked. And I found people that had looked at you when they shook your hand. They had warm hearts. And I was touched. I said, I want a piece of this action. This is where I belong. I didn't care about what I looked like, what I had, or anything like that. I wanted to be someplace like this. So situation came up where I had a chance to buy something, and it was up in North Fork. It was a little, what I call a ranchette, and I bought it. And I didn't think I'd be able to keep it because I couldn't afford it. Business was kind of off and whatnot. And so I bought it, and it took me 10 years to get it paid off. So I moved up here, burned my bridges, and said, I'm not going back to California ever again. I didn't want to change anything up here. I was happy up here. But I did have to go back a year later to finish up some business. And while I was there, I met a lady, and I kind of knew her beforehand, but I invited her up. She was going through a hard time, and I said, why don't you come up? I'm going to show you something of the last vestige of the Wild West. It's called Salmon, Idaho. And so about 4 months later, she finally showed up. And she spent a couple of days with me. She went back, she quit her job, sold her furniture. She moved up, moved in. 6 months later, we were married in the North Fork Church. We were the first people to ever get married there. And 6 weeks later, she come out of the bathroom, and she was holding, I don't have a pen, she was holding a stick, and she's crying. And I said, what's the matter? She said, it's blue. And I said, what do you mean it's blue? She said, it's blue. I said, it's what? So there I was, 9 months later, 65, sitting next to my wife, spread-eagled, and I'm trying to think of the doctor's name, who was the Nadelson. Dr. Nadelson says to me, hold this. And I put it in my hand, I'm looking, and it was a glob of flesh with little appendages. And, and it was my daughter. And I looked at this and I said, oh my God, my life will never be the same. And lo, it wasn't. I try not to get emotional here. God gave me my wife, Maureen, who taught me what love was. And she stood by me, and she's loved me. And I have a daughter that's now just turned 19. And her name is Megan Ann Barton. She does the national anthem for everywhere around here. She's a singer. A lot of people know her. But she's got a heart of gold, and God has been so good to me. So here we are, we're living our little ranchette up in North Fork for 15 years, but still, there was something inside of me that was missing. I didn't really know how to pray. I tried. Trying is not doing. So what happened was one day I'm out there and I'm spraying. Y'all know what knapweed is? Well, they had a knapweed convention on my property, all right? And so I'm on my ATV and I'm going along and I'm spraying. It's been 3 hours spraying on a very hot day. Needless to say, that ATV was hot. So I said, I can't do it. So I put my leg over this side and I'm spraying. There we go. And I'm going backwards. There's a bridge to get to my property. And I went over the side, about 10-foot drop on the abutment down to the bottom. And I wasn't out, but my level of consciousness was way off, and there was a tint of red all over the place. And I put my hand on my head, and there was a stick stuck in my skull. And I looked, and I realized there's gasoline pouring out all over me. And I knew this is not good. So I had to turn that engine off because it was so hot. You could steam and smoke and whatever. And I knew it was going to blow. And so I tried to turn the key off, but the key was gone. And my level of consciousness was not as such that I could think about there was a kill switch you could use. And so I'm sitting there and I realize I got to get out from underneath this. Now, here's the abutment, cement, all this way, right? Straight down. There was a tree kind of going out like this. The ATV went down, forced the tree out, went all the way down to the bottom. The tree came back and blocked it in. I was sitting here, and from here, my back's like this, my legs were going straight out. My back is against the abutment. I was trapped. I could not work. I couldn't move. It wasn't a matter of whether to wiggle my way out. I couldn't go forward, obviously. I couldn't go backwards, obviously. And left and right, I couldn't go. And I was trapped, and I got gas pouring out all over me. And it didn't take a whole lot for me to realize is that this is not a good place to be. I didn't think about praying. Just suddenly, all of a sudden, it came to me, and I knew I was going to die. And I wasn't scared. I wasn't thinking about being scared. The only thought that came to my mind was my daughter is not going to have a father. And I knew I was going to burn to death. I wasn't afraid. The only thought, my daughter is not going to have a dad. And I just kind of accepted that. And this all took place like boom, 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 boom. So I'm walking up the road. I go to my wife who's working in the orchard. And I said, honey, get your purse, get the keys, meet me at the truck. You got to get me to the hospital. I hurt myself. And the little humor here, there's a difference between men and women. Honey, go get your purse, get me to the hospital. Are you okay? No, I hurt myself, honey. Just get your purse. Just get me to the hospital. What happened? Marine, please get your purse, meet me at the truck, and get me to the hospital. Okay, but are you all right? Yeah. So I barked a little bit. And then I said, so I finally got to the truck. Now I was up there, we don't have ambulances. We have EMTs that do POV, private owned vehicles, and I was one of them. So I got to my truck and I opened my medical bag up and I grabbed a wad of 4x4s, gauze pads, and I just slapped it on my head. And I got a vet wrap, a big roll of vet wrap, and I started wrapping my head. And I used the whole thing. Again, I'm still kind of unfocused here. And time I got done, I looked like Ahab to Arab, you know. And I grabbed a bottle of oxygen and I got in the truck, and I'm turning it all the way up to 15 liters. And so she finally gets in. She says, "Can you tell me what happened?" I said, "No, just get me to the hospital now." So we're driving to the hospital, and she starts to cry. And I finally said, "Honey, please listen. This is a 65-mile-an-hour zone. We need to be safe. That's all right, but you can go faster than 40 miles an hour." So we get to the hospital, and now because I know most of the medical physicians, the guy says, "David, what's going on? What happened to you here?" I said, "Well, I got a stick stuck in my skull." And so he said, "Well, let's take a look." So he unwraps it, cuts it all loose, and he said, "David, that's not a stick." I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "It's a key." Yeah. So they stitched me up, and I went home and managed to survive that afternoon. The next day, now here's what comes, folks. The next day I had the tow truck out there. The tow truck is trying to pull that ATV out. And the two guys are saying, "Well, I don't know what we're going to do. We can't get this thing out." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Look, it's stuck. It just," I said, "Yeah, I know. I was underneath that." And they said, "No, it's not. You weren't underneath it." I said, "I was underneath it." They said, "No, you may have thought you were, but you weren't." And all of a sudden I knew. Before this, a friend of mine, you may know him, Caleb Davis. He's an outfitter up there. He's a very dear friend of mine. I used to talk to him about God, and I would say, "What do you think? Why is this?" And I was always dancing around. And he said, "David, I'm tired of listening to this." He said, here's the deal. You either believe or you don't. You either believe in God or you don't. Going back to me standing there looking at this ATV down on it, and I just, all of a sudden, there was no more dancing. I just knew there was a God, and I knew that he loved me. And I didn't know what to do, so I just kind of turned around. I went back up the house, and I kind of stumbled around. And the next day, I went down. I was walking down Main Street in Salmon, and I walked by this. They were building a church at the time, working on remodeling it. It's called the Calvary Church, all right? And yeah, I say that in humor. And so I needed to talk to a pastor. I needed to talk to somebody about this because I didn't know, this is beyond my ability. I've never had anything like this before. It's beyond my ability of comprehension. So I walked in and there was this kid in there and I said, excuse me, is the pastor here? He said, yeah. I said, could you let me talk to him? He said, yeah, come over here, sit down. So I sat down and the kid sat down. I said, I'm sorry, but you don't understand. I want to speak to the pastor. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, my name's Hagen. I'm the pastor. And the first thought that came to my mind was, you got to be kidding me. Second thought that came to my mind that fast was, at 12 years old, Christ was in the temple talking to some of the Pharisees, teaching them. Right? And I said, well, why not? You know. So he said, so just to that, I told him the story, and he just kind of looked at me and said, why don't you come to church Sunday? And I thought to myself, this is whatever day it was, Friday, Thursday. Sunday's a long ways away. I don't know if I can handle this. So I did. I went there. And finally I walked up to him and after the church, I said, I was really impressed with your service. And I said, I would like to talk to you more. And I don't know, I need some direction here. And it was all like a fog. So he says, come talk to me Tuesday. So I went and talked to him Tuesday and he said, here is what I want you to do. I said, I want to know what to do. And he said, I want you to start reading the Bible. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, I want you to start with Acts. So he gave me a Bible and I'm looking at it. I'm trying to read it. I couldn't really understand it. And I thought, here's this guy who used to beat up all the Jews, tried to kill them and get rid of them. And his name is Paul and he wrote the Bible. No, something's not right here. You know. So I went back and I told him I was having a hard time with it. And so Hagen gave me this Bible, and it's called the New Language Testimony or something to that effect. But it's written in English, all right? It's the same thing, same words, same message, but it's just written in English, and which I really liked it, you know. And so I told you, I said, so you heard the beginning, you heard the testimony. It doesn't end there. Life goes on, and there are challenges, all right? And there are events that take place where I don't know if it's just because at times I'm weak, but at times that we live in a world where there's evil. I get tested. People question me. People will say to me, I have some friends of mine that are devout atheists, and they will say, why do you believe in God? And very clearly, without any question, any doubt, I just automatically answer and I say this to them, because I want to. Just that simple, because I want to. And besides, if there is no God, then who do I say thank you to? Who do I say thank you to for this life, for this little glob, 19 years ago that was in my hand, for this lovely woman that has saved me, for the chances that life has offered me. And I have learned that, yes, there are challenges in life, but through your sermon today was about, are you going to suck on milk? Or are you going to eat some food or whatever, something solid? When I have those questions and those doubts, I read the Bible and I pray. And I pray anywhere. I don't care if I'm driving down the road, whatever, but I'll just pray. And it just brings me back to where I want to be. And the last thing that I want to say to you is this, is that shortly thereafter, the incident that took place, and after being with Kagan and after trying to read the Bible and start reading the Bible, I was driving down out of my driveway and I made a right turn. As I'm making this right turn, all of a sudden, I was someplace else. And I don't know where I was. But what I do know, this is what I felt. It was the most beautiful, peaceful, loving sense that I can imagine. I can't describe it. And at the time, I thought to myself, oh Lord, you just showed me, gave me a 5-second preview of what heaven's like. And since then, I finally figured it out. Maybe what it was the Holy Spirit touched me. And I'm so grateful to God. And He's given me an opportunity, and this is one of the things that I really like to do, is when I start to enjoy the physical aspects of life, too much little temptations there. I became a chaplain at the hospital. And going in and doing God's work it brings me right back where I need to be and where I want to be. Amen. And with that, I just know that I have to go after the meat and not the milk. And that's where I choose to be. So that's my story. Thank you.